Don't forget, to hear the full-length interview, head over to the website or iTunes and subscribe to the B-Ball Breakdown podcast. Hey sports fans, Coach Nick here, and welcome to B-Ball Breakdown and our podcast. I am pleased to have Ben Bolch, the LA Times beat writer for the LA Clippers. And Ben, thanks for coming on the show. I'm really excited to talk a little bit about what's happening with the best basketball team in Los Angeles.
Sounds great. Thank you for having me on.
So let's start off first because it was weird. I was having a discussion with one of our writers, I think it was a day ago, about how Jamal Crawford is the guy they probably should trade to make the next step up and get better so they can make a run for a deep in the playoffs. So where did all this stuff happen? I woke up and all of a sudden I turned on the news and there it is. Jamal Crawford's being shopped. So what's the latest on how that all evolved?
Well, I think, as you probably know, the Clippers don't have a lot of assets right now. They've traded away some of their first-round draft picks, including one that they shipped out in the Jared Dudley trade. They moved one to get Doc Rivers. So they don't have a lot of assets right now beyond Jamal Crawford. Their bench, as we know, has been a sore spot all season as far as a dearth of production. So you look outside of Jamal, and what do they really have that they're willing to deal? Not much. So they've kind of boxed themselves into a corner in that respect. But the big question that I think that they're asking themselves right now is, would the return that they would get for Jamal Crawford exceed the benefits of losing him? And I think that's something that they're really going to have to dig deep and think about hard over these next 20 hours or so and say, is it worth it? Are we really improving ourselves by getting rid of a prolific scorer who's been a great chemistry and a great team fit ever since he's been here? And that's something that I'm not sure is going to happen.
Have you heard anything specific of who they might move and how that might shake out?
Well, I mean, I think that the reports that have been bandied about are pretty accurate, that, some of the guys they're targeting would be from the Nuggets and Wilson Chandler and Aaron Aflalo. Now, to get them, they wouldn't be able to do a straight-up Jamal Crawford for one of those guys because the Nuggets are rebuilding, looking for draft picks. So they would need to probably move Jamal to a contender for a first-round pick, then swap that pick to Denver or another team to get the player that they think they can help them at the small forward position.
Okay, interesting. And then that's another train of thought, because obviously I would think a lot of contenders would love to have a scorer like that off the bench. But then you're thinking to yourself, the Clippers are those contenders that need that scorer off the bench. It's a very strange thing. My take on it as a coach's perspective would certainly be they would be a better team with a 3-and-D guy on the wing who doesn't really need to dribble much, who doesn't need to score. Because in my opinion, when they're healthy, with you have Blake and CP3 and Redick, I think you have enough offense to get you when you start to shorten those rotations in the playoffs. And I think what they're missing is that defender who's going to guard a guy like KD or any of the other fantastic wing scorers there are in the West. So what do you think about that? Is this something where would it make them better if they got a guy like Wilson Chandler?
I think that it's something that you definitely have to think about, but at the same time, you have to think about the chemistry fit of integrating a new player that they're not familiar with. This core's been together with Jamal. This is their third year now. They're a great fit. They were a Jamal Crawford fingertip layup against the Thunder in Game 5 from winning that game and possibly winning that series. So we know that he plays big minutes even in the playoffs with a short rotation. Jamal Crawford is very valuable. I've heard some people saying, well, that you don't want an ISO guy like that in the playoffs, but I think he's very valuable. I mean, obviously his defense is not as strong as somebody like Aaron Aflalo, but they would be kind of changing on the fly with a new guy. Not sure that overall it would be worth the disruption to what I think is already a very good chemistry team, as far as Blake and Chris Paul being aware of what they have with Jamal Crawford, how to play with him in big moments, and looking to get back to where they were last year and take the next step.
It was very nice of you to point to Jamal Crawford's finger roll miss as opposed to the other things that happened in Game 5 that ended up being a real problem. Certainly, which brings us actually to CP3, because I'd like to talk about him for a minute. Recently on Twitter, when I watch games, I'm really focused on simply the plays. If I'm going through like synergy footage or whatever, I don't see all the extra stuff that's going on in between the whistles. So for some reason, I have been slightly oblivious to this meme that's going on now about CP3 being the worst complainer of all time during these games, and to the point where it's kind of grating on maybe teammates. So can you fill me in? Because I've held him up to a pedestal of being the gold standard as a point guard for so long that, the Game 5 was one of those moments where it kind of shook my belief in him. But what about this notion of that he's a real problem with the referees, and people are now starting to sort of turn on him?
Well, I think it's a team-wide problem with the Clippers more so than just Chris Paul when you look at their technicals. I mean, Matt Barnes is a technical magnet, and so is Blake Griffin to an extent. So when you look at that team-wide, I think it's not just Chris Paul, but I think one thing that he could do a better job of is reining some of these other guys in and setting a better example as far as how to react when things don't go their way and the refs have turned against them. They need to keep their mouths shut and their composure. And certainly he's someone that I think they would take their lead from it if he did a better job of that.
Well, I called up just for curiosity some 5-man lineups because I'm kind of wanting to see how that was shaking out. And here's a curious thing. Generally, a really good team, a top Western Conference team, is going to have at least their top 2 or 3 most played lineups a positive net rating. Their second most lineup, though, is, while it's positive, it's only a 5.3 positive, which is close to getting close to 0. And that lineup is Jamal Crawford, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, Chris Paul, and J.J. Redick. So basically, Jamal coming in for Matt Barnes. Whereas when Matt Barnes is in with them, they're plus 16.1. I mean, that's pretty big. So what about this notion of the bench production? I mean, I know we have, Crawford is there and he gives them production, but I think he definitely takes it away on the other side. So, do they have enough production? Is Hawes going to be enough of a guy off the bench, because they're certainly not getting it from anywhere else on the big guys?
Well, it's interesting that, Hawes has pretty much been a pretty big disappointment, but we did see in the first game that Blake missed, he had 17 points in the first half and just looked amazing. I think like the guy that the Clippers thought they were getting. So I know that the potential is there. I think he's just really struggled to integrate himself into this bench role. And I think they're hoping that, they've got like 25 more games to kind of get him figured out as to what he can do and what his strengths are that they can utilize with that second unit. Now, Austin Rivers has helped them defensively, not as much offensively. He did have a streak of about 3 consecutive double-figure games there, but there's not a lot of scoring punch on that bench besides Crawford. I mean, we've talked about this, but Glenn Davis, Hito Turkoglu. I mean, these are guys who are going to give you a basket every now and then, but not really like guys that you're going to want to be on the floor in key moments in playoff games. So definitely some question marks there about what they can really get out of this second unit.
Right. Now, the argument could be that the rotations get really short in the playoffs, so you don't really need much more than 16, 17 minutes from Hawes and maybe like 6 minutes from Big Baby. I haven't liked anything I've seen from Big Baby. I really haven't seen much from Turkoglu either. The one thing I'd be concerned about with Austin Rivers is he's got a big X on his chest. As soon as he checks in, you watch the other team just goes at him like bloody murder any chance they get. And, I don't know. You are seeing some better defensive efforts out of him recently?
Yeah, I mean, the first couple of games, he did a pretty good job of checking the backup point guard. They played him at times with Chris Paul on the floor. Mm-hmm. They like that his length is he's pretty big for a backup point guard. I think he's 6'5". With some good length and not the fastest guy in the world, but I think he can do a decent job of staying in front of his guy. So with that, and they like the fact that he does penetrate on offense and get other guys involved. So it was easy to want to really just say that this was a terrible move and he's been awful, but he really hasn't. I think he's been a decent NBA player, nothing great, but certainly not a disaster like I think some people were fearing.
Well, that's an interesting take on all those things Clippers. Ben, thanks for coming on the show and offering this up. You have to come back again. Maybe we can spend a little more time now that we've got our Skype all sorted out. But thanks again, everybody. Make sure to follow Ben on Twitter and read his stuff at the LA Times. And Ben, you got to come back.
Absolutely, anytime.
And then don't forget, sports fans, at B-Ball Breakdown, we're not a channel, we're a conversation. You in? Are you in, Ben?
Absolutely. Count me in.
Don't forget, to hear the full-length interview, head over to the website or iTunes and subscribe to the B-Ball Breakdown podcast.